welcome to a new event of Weber Scholars Network. Today, I will be the moderator of the event. It is a pleasure to me to be with all of us. We will have the honor to hear the presentation of Béatrice Hibou about Max Weber and neoliberal bureaucratization. So thank you very much, Professor Hibou, for being with us. After the presentation of Professor Hibou, Yannis Ktenas will make some comments, and then we will open the discussion for the audience. Before hearing Béatrice Hibou, I want to briefly introduce our network for the new ones. Weber Scholars Network brings together scholars around the world with an interest in the work of Max Weber. Our interest is not only to reflect on the Weber's legacy as a thinker, but also to approach the present in critical dialogue with his work. We also think Weber in relationship with other authors like Walter Benjamin, George Lukács, Carl Schmitt, Cornelius Castoriadis, and so on. In our last activities emerges the relevance of Weberian concepts for the development of the social sciences and for the critical understanding of contemporary capitalism, neoliberalism, and the challenges of our democracies. So if you are interested, our website is weberscholar.net, and you can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So now I will introduce our guest. I have prepared some words. I hope, Béatrice Hibou, that they are right. So if it's not, you can tell me. Béatrice Hibou is Director of Research at the National Center for Scientific Research, CNRS, in France. She works at the Center for International Studies at Sciences Po University, CERI, and she holds a PhD in political economy from the School for Advanced Studies in the Social Sciences, EHESS. Béatrice Hibou has developed a comparative research in political economy, focusing from a Weberian perspective on the political significance of economic reforms based on cases from sub-Saharan Africa, the Maghreb, and Europe. In 1996, she published L'Afrique est-elle protectionniste? And since 2008, she directs Les Afriques, the book series published by Cartala. Béatrice Hibou has also worked thoroughly on the concept of neoliberal bureaucratization, bringing together the intellectual tradition of Max Weber and Michel Foucault. In 2015, she published The Bureaucratization of the World in the Neoliberal Era, an International and Comparative Perspective. In 2020, the book has been translated into Spanish, La burocratización del mundo en la era neoliberal. Moreover, she has recently co-edited with Jean-Pierre Grossein a collective work on Max Weber called Travailler avec Max Weber, which aims to explore the heuristic value of the Weberian approach in the social sciences today. So, Professor Hibou, thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the network. And I am very glad to have a discussion with you because, as you know, I am not a Weberian. I am not a specialist of Weber. I am a Weberian, but not specialist of Weber. But I work with Weber thanks to specialists. And it's from this perspective that I am going to talk to you today. And more specifically, I will talk about my encounter with Weber in my work on neoliberalism. And I want to do it with 4 points, mobilizing my different books and research, mostly the book Privatizing the State, that was published in French in 1999 and published in English in 2004. The Bureaucratization of the World, that was published in France in 2012 and in English 15, and in Greek, in Spanish in 17, and in Greek last year. And Tisser le temps politique au Maroc in 2020, and that is published this day in English in the title Weaving Political Time in Morocco. I mentioned this book because it's important in my way of working with Max Weber. And also another book that is Political Anatomy of Domination, of course. So at the end of the 90s, the dominant interpretation of the transformation of the world, and especially the intervention of the state, was the idea of retreat of the state, with authors like Susan Strange, with the rise of private actors, leading not only to the loss of legitimacy and effectiveness for state action, but also to a gap in responsibility at the international level as well as the national level. And in such situation as a sub-Saharan African country or North African country on which I was working at that time, journalists and also academics were talking about erosion of the state, impotence of the state, collapse state, the coming anarchy, and so on and so on. But I was very uncomfortable with this analysis because all these interpretations are very normative and linked to developmental state ideology in developing country and to a welfare state ideology in developed country. And as I was observing in the field works, and at that time it was mainly Cameroon, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Mozambique, and also in North Africa, Morocco, and Tunisia. So in my field works, it was not, I was not seeing this. And I feel the need to go away from these normative and limited references. And it was not for me certain that we were witnessing a trend towards retreat or even reduced interventionism. Certainly, the state was is always going through a metamorphosis, but before going as far as talking of retreat or collapse, it's necessary to grasp the precise means of intervention that the state employs at that day and today. That is to say, to look at practices. And in my edited book, Privatizing the State, so I have argued against the idea that the state was withdrawn or failed. And I have suggested that that we have to problematize the redeployment of the state through the notion of privatization of the state or privatizing the state. So this expression or this notion need to be understood not just as the cannibalization of the state by private interest, a position that people have often attributed to me, but it's not at all the case, but more as a continual reshaping on the pursuit of the formation of the state under the impact of economic liberalization, privatization, and an increasing reliance on the so-called civil society. To do this, Weber was my main source of inspiration. In spite of the fact that the term Weberian state is always used to describe the specific form of the rational, legal, and bureaucratic state, and also, in spite of the fact that Weber is primarily cited as the theorist of this ideal form, Weber himself worked on other non-bureaucratic forms of state with non-permanent interventions. And in particular, the idea of what I have called décharge in French, or discharge in English, I don't know. And décharge was the French translation of the German terms, sorry because I don't speak German, Verpachtung and Überweisung, that Weber uses to talk about feudal situation. So I thought that this term was interesting to round off our analysis of this mode of governing and to see that this modality of exercising power, which in particular avoid the cost of a major administrative apparatus, was important, and it was historically common. So and Weber talked about this in historical economy and in economy and society. So in no way did it indicate the absence of a state or a government. It was rather characteristic of a situation or a moment in history that were much less bureaucratized and relying little or not at all on an apparatus of management. So it's a situation of indirect government exercised through intermediaries. So the idea of privatization of the state, of privatizing the state, was for me a way to emphasize the role of private actors in this indirect government. So a way to talk about not of the retreat of the state, but the redeployment of the state through intermediaries, and mostly private intermediaries. So this was in the end of the 90s. And then I was working on different things. And at the beginning of the 2010, I was working on neoliberal bureaucratization. And it's my thought on neoliberal bureaucratization follow the wake of my previous research on privatizing the state in two ways. First, my book focused its analysis on the transformation of the sense of the notion of public and private. And to some extent, my work on neoliberal bureaucratization is an attempt to investigate in greater depth the significance of the private that has thus been reified by refining our understanding of what comprises the private, distinguishing within its actors the market, enterprise, individual entrepreneur, the manager, the legal expert, large-scale industrial enterprises, finance, and so on and so on. Also, processes, distinguishing processes, the process of normalization and standardization, flexibilization and subcontracting, financialization, managerialization, commodification, etc. That processes that are often found concurrently, but cannot necessarily be reduced to one another. So thus my book on neoliberal bureaucratization, it's an attempt to take full account of this transformation of meaning and shifts the focus from the category of private towards which make it possible for practices to spread, and the model of rationalization itself to be universalized. That is what I have conceptualized in terms of the process of abstraction on the formal shaping of ways of thinking, seeing, and understanding. And my analysis of neoliberal bureaucratization thought, and this is the second point, thought to curate an aspect of my work on the privatization of the state by taking up Weber's sociological definition of bureaucracy. That is to say, a process of rationalization based on the need for calculability, predictability, and so on. And therefore, a universal process, as Weber himself put it. So I was able to show that the privatization of the state did not necessarily mean less bureaucracy today, but a different kind of bureaucracy, a bureaucracy inspired by market management norms and procedures. And some years later, at the end of the 2010, this is the first stage in my neoliberal reflection on the state, and it came with my last book on Morocco that I wrote with Mohamed Tozi, and thanks also to my collaboration with Jean-Pierre Grossein. Analysis of Moroccan state have often been mirrored in exoticism and exceptionalism, with a vision of the system of archaic and dysfunctional. So to move away from such an approach, a very normative approach, it's important to think about the state in non-normative terms without any preconceived judgment as to what a modern state ought to be. So to do this, it seemed best to use a notion that goes beyond the state as a simple institution or system of institution, and beyond also an entity whose key claim is to the monopoly of the legitimate use of force, as it's canonically defined in political science textbooks. This definition is well known from Weberian specialists. This definition is often presented as being simply the legitimate use of force. And also it's overlooked the essential nuance that lies in the idea of the nuance is that Weber is not saying that it's the legitimate use of force, but the idea of the claim to the legitimate use of force. But worse still, it's systematically presented as being Weber's key definition. I thought it were a general theory and not an expression linked to a specific geographical and historical situation. And in this work on Morocco, I was trying to conceptualize this very specific state, but in a more general way. Grossein suggested that I reread certain passages of The Objectivity of Knowledge, in which Weber makes a particularly remarkable effort of abstraction to define the state beyond particular situation. And it's a definition that particularly inspired me and that I am adopting from now. So this definition and I think that it's Hans Henrik Brun that translated it, so thanks a lot, in English. It's an infinite, I don't know, excuse me, my English, number of diffuse and discrete human actions and acts of aggressions and of relationships regulating in practice and legally, of which some are unique, while others recur regularly. And all this is held together by an idea, namely the belief in norms and relation of authority of some human beings over others, which are actually or should be valid. This belief is found in manifold nuances in the mind of each individual, partly intellectually well thought out, partly vaguely felt, and partly passively accepted. If these individuals themselves actually had a clear conception of these ideas as such, they would have no need of the general theory of the state, which sets itself the task of articulating it. So this is in the objectivity of knowledge in social science, and this definition is wonderful, and for me it was really an enlightenment to read it, because it introduces what two elements that are very important in my view, and once more, I come from a very empirical tradition, thinking theoretically by empiry. It's taking into account both the diversity of form of action, including, as Weber told, non-action or laissez-faire, and a belief in norms and interpretation that, through constant adjustment of different kinds, enable domination. So this was the first point about the state that Weber inspired me. And the domination is precisely the second point I would like to develop. I work on domination with two books before a neoliberal bureaucracy. It was The Force of Obedience on the Tunisian case, the Tunisian regime under Ben Ali, and Political Anatomy of Domination. That was a comparative book on the exercise of domination in authoritarian situations. But my thought on neoliberal bureaucracy is directly influenced and follows from this my analysis of these two books. So with reference to Tunisia and to authoritarian political situation, I try to show how this problematic could not be limited to the dimension of coercion and violence, and the adoption of a relational conception of power will make it possible to understand domination more fully by including the constellation of interest through which, of course, aiming at domination was transmitted, but also through which people acquiesce and obey. So my reflection on the political meaning of neoliberal bureaucratization take this investigation further, analyzing in ever greater detail the insidious leniency, douceurs insidieuses in French, that I use in The Force of Obedience on Political Anatomy of Domination. And I conceptualize this from an expression proposed by Michel Foucault in Surveiller et punir. these insidious leniencies lie at the heart, for me, of the exercise of domination, and it's a winding path, as Weber wrote in Sociology of Religion. So in my book on neoliberal bureaucratization, I take up a position outside the dominant categorization of political science, and indeed a common language, as they are all too often problematic and in any case tendentious. So instead of setting out from the nature of the regime under analysis, the way states are described and the distinction between authoritarian, democratic, transitional situation or developmentalist, socialist, liberal situation, I propose instead to emphasize the dispositif, the structures or mechanisms, which I call neoliberal formalities and practices that simultaneously give birth to them and make them possible, and then can currently be found in all these different configurations in a generalized way that varies both in their intensity and in their different modes of operation. So the diversity of logics and behaviors is infinite, and in my book I have tried to give the reader some idea of this. What I aim to emphasize through these examples is the way that it's simplistic and problematic to see neoliberal bureaucratization as the expression of a great project, economic in nature, for example, the will to power of certain capitalism, or a great political and institutional project, for example, an instrument of decision on the state desire to exert control. So in other words, the product simply of public policies or planning and consistent strategies. Of course, these strategies do exist, indeed, in local and partial cases. Neoliberal bureaucracy, for me, is, however, not the expression of a project. Since they view domination as being exerted from above, critical discourse on the bureaucratization of everyday life and of the world of work generally attribute the responsibility for this to one or two agents, either the state on its administrative apparatus that demand ever more documents to be filed, rules to be respected, procedure to be followed, or big capital, starting with finance, the main legal bureau of multinational companies on their demands for profitability in a competitive world that imposes the extension and the spread of norms on certification, of ratio, indicators, benchmarks, traceability techniques, the managerial use of time, and a very specific interpretation of excellence, quality, performance, or efficiency. What I have tried to show is that we cannot remain or accept such an interpretation which ignores the causal heteronomy of all social action and which does produce effects that are necessarily unexpected and paradoxical. The actors of this bureaucratization are much more numerous and difficult to define, with the result that, to some extent, I show that we are all neoliberal bureaucrats, of course, to different degrees. So, because social life is much too complex to be the result of the deliberate will of politicians or of senior civil servants or of directors of large private companies on dominant social groups. This is why I talk about bureaucratic participation, and it's an attempt to explain a phenomenon that in actual fact has many dimensions. Neoliberal bureaucratization is made up of the overlapping of millions of intentionalities and non-intentionalities, something that the Weberian notion of constellation of interest, motivation or logics, and of complication enable us to conceptualize. The governed people view their practices and their social relation in many different ways and give them meanings that are not necessarily those of governments. This allows them to act independently of the will of the latter. Taking constellation of interest into account in this way has the advantage that we can understand the plurality and the heterogeneity at work behind practices of domination, and here neoliberal domination, not equating acceptance, silence, or participation with obedience or submission, and not taking docility as adhesion. It also helps to link together Foucault's analysis of powers and Michel de Certeau's conception of practices and daily life with Weber's approach to domination. For Weber, as you know very well in this group, domination does not mean that a stronger force of nature somehow prevails, but that the action command of certain people is related in terms of its meaning to the action, obedience of certain other people, and vice versa, so that one may, on the average, count on the realization of the expectations according to which the action of both sides is oriented. Close quoted. But taking a constellation of interest into account is also a way of integrating what are commonly called belief, illusions, and ideas put into practices. The notion of routinization, but as we know, all routinization is a problematic translation, and in French you use quotidianisation, so maybe everydayization, I don't know. So the notion of, excuse my German, Verhaltensglishung, so I don't know. So routinization enables us to broaden their field by suggesting the diversity of these modes of penetration in life, and thereby the many different meanings that they can assume. Finally, it is mediated, and this is very important, by subjective interpretation. In other words, the filter of behavior and understanding characteristic of different type of ethos, of human types and conduct of life that are more or less adequate to the form of neoliberal bureaucratization. So directly linked to this criticism of major international projects, another methodological point inspired by Weber was very important to me. It's this trend to focus on the contribution, the partial contribution, the unexpected, the fragmented reason, the various and heterogeneous motivation, the causal plurality, the tangle of reciprocal influences and effects which occurs unbeknown to actors. So all are expression by Weber, notably in sociology of religion. So the effects of domination emerge from these complex processes that leave a fundamental element to the unexpected, the partial nature of certain decision, and the unconscious dimension of certain choice, and even of types of behavior, participatory strategy undertaken without the knowledge of actors themselves. So it's therefore less a matter of intentionality, for example, the intention of the state to bureaucratize, than that the matter of the blind effects of micro decision, routines, temporal shifts, different ways of understanding specific logics of action on interest that are convergent but not necessarily identical. So I have already gone on far too long, so I am going to be much quicker, but I would like to stress two more important points. The first one, or third one, is the question of ideology and practices. To use a Weber metaphor, all ideology do not blossom like a flower, but are necessarily filtered by practical, material, and ideal interests. So these practical, material, and ideal interests must be explored for the case of neoliberalism, as in, of course, as in other concrete situations. And to understand these filters and mediation, Weber invites us to look at the bearers, Träger in German. So, a porter in French. So, the origin of the precepts of neoliberalism is much more complex than many theorists suppose, and these precepts necessarily pass through the filter of practical interest, whether in the shape of concrete phenomena or of ideas, characteristic of these bearer individual or bearer groups, and complex relations that impose form on the way they spread, on the way it become a commonplace. So one literal illustration of the importance of these bearers can be found in the work of experts, consultants, and other advisors in management, auditing, and coaching, for whom neoliberal formalities do not simply constitute the very core of their métier, a proof of their specialization and above all their skill, but also constitute a market and profits, a possibility for professional self-affirmation and recognition, and a mechanism for social promotion. But other examples will broaden the meaning that the idea of bearers or mediation can assume. For example, the middle class, mainly preoccupied by security and protection, bear neoliberal bureaucratization by giving a desirable allure to formalities which are explicitly constraining or coercive in their ambitions, such as the norms necessary for the consumption of 100% pure food, the traceability procedure that can detect the the slightest deviation from production norms, on the increasing and overlapping use of companies' books with the aim of imposing zero tolerance from infractions, and so on and so on. So in other words, neoliberal bureaucracy is embodied not just in a project. It does not pass mainly through strictly defined and clearly delimited actors or groups, but to some extent it takes shape in every individual who lives in society. And it's in this sense that I talk about bureaucratic participation. We are all bureaucrats, and sometimes we are the bureaucrats of ourselves. We are all mediators, actors more or less aware of this process, and we play a part in spreading these formalities, even if we may simultaneously be the victim of these formalities. The second and fourth point, and the last one, is the ideal type thinking. One error, I think, is lies in thinking that neoliberal bureaucratization is the figure that alone defines the present moment, neoliberalism, a period which we know, yes, that usually we call neoliberalism. And I think this is a mistake, which fails to take into account the complexity of any historical situation. Of course, my book has the ambition to show that neoliberalism could appear as a universal bureaucratization, in the sense that following Weber, it characterizes all fields of life in society, and a bureaucratization of the world. And this is in echo to the book of Bruno Rizzi, which show that bureaucratization process is a configuration as well as Europe, Russia, and United States, but I can add today in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. But even if it's a universal bureaucratization and a bureaucratization of the world, I never implied that this expression all by itself sum up the conditions in which we live. Neoliberal bureaucratization is, in my thinking, only one aspect, certainly an important and maybe the more important aspect, but only one aspect, insofar as the infinite complexity of social reality on which Weber insists cannot be grasped simultaneously within a single dimension. So as a result, we can consider neoliberal bureaucratization as an ideal type. That is to say, this figure is less an attempt to place reality in its overall context. It's more a way of bringing out the distinctive characteristic of current social practices, more specifically the systematic use of formalities produced from within the world of private management and extended beyond this particular milieu, or the way of conceptualizing rationality, quality, performance, mainly in terms of practical managerial ends, including in situations which have nothing to do with the world of large-scale private enterprises. So it's, as Weber writes about ideal type, it's a way, sorry, it's to present in, it's presented in historical reality in their most clearly marked and most consistent outline. So as Weber notes, the ideal type never exists in its pure form, and in the reality of life, there are only intermediary cases or mixed forms that combine different types in the most varied ways. In reality, it goes without saying that these distinct characteristics are in different ways mediated, fragmented, more or less coherent, and wool more or less mixed up with different and heterogeneous characteristics. Weber quotations. So I have described all these processes as all that is not included in neoliberal formalities as informalities. But these formalities had to be understood not as informal economy, but as everything that has not been formalized in accordance with the dominant rules, and that has not become a set of norms to be respected, or procedure to be followed, or categories to be adopted, and so on and so on. So life in society is both these neoliberal formalities and informalities. So just like neoliberal formalities, these informalities are indispensable for the functioning of life in society. And they comprise so many tendencies that may converge with the tendency of neoliberal bureaucratization, but also they may diverge from them. So in other words, a conceptualization in terms of neoliberal bureaucratization does not aim to force the infinite variety of historical reality into schematic patterns, nor does it allow us, of course, to grasp any hypothetical essence of neoliberalism. It aims solely to forge conceptual reference points that can be used for precise ends and to understand this contemporary situation. So it's a guiding instrument which clarifies analysis, but also as a vector of coherence for the latter, which helps to present the diversity of behaviors more easily. And it may help us to understand some dimension of the later, and to make possible comparison understood as operation that make explicit the differences that enable us to put behind us over general analysis and to bring out the singularity of every historical situation. So as you can understand, what interests me about Weber is his approach, his methodology, is a way of questioning concepts as dependent of situations, and his approach which leads us to think the general and the theoretical from an empirical point of view, whatever form it takes. And as you see, my empirical point of view was or African or Maghrebian political situation, but also neoliberal bureaucratization. And Weber has never worked on neoliberalism, of course, and for good reason, but it seems to me to be an indisputable thinker on the transformation of form and above all of meaning of capitalism in the diversity of its concrete situation, not with a translation between the 19th or beginning of 20th century to today, but using its methodology and revisiting its concepts. Thank you.
Thank you, Béatrice Hibou, for your wonderful presentation. So now it's the turn of Yannis Ktenas, and then we will have time to ask, I think, a lot of questions that we are thinking, because it was so inspiring. But now I will let Yannis Ktenas. He holds a PhD in political philosophy and social theory from Pantheon University in Athens. Yannis has been a junior visiting fellow of the Institute of Human Science in Vienna, and he teaches political philosophy and sociology at Pantheon University and National Kapodistrian University of Athens. He has worked extensively on Cornelius Castoriadis and Max Weber's thought, and lately he has been focusing on Kant Mannheim sociology of knowledge. So thanks, Yannis. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Lucía. Thank you, Beatrice. I will try to be brief in order to have time to discuss. So good afternoon to everyone. I'm really glad to be participating in this event, and I'm also very glad that we finally got the chance to organize such an event with Béatrice Hibou. I believe her work can prove to be very important for the purposes of our network, since it combines two key elements. First, Beatrice has studied Weber in depth, and although she doesn't see herself as a Weber scholar per se, she has, in my view, an exceptional understanding of the Weberian corpus, including its epistemological and methodological implications. At the same time, it is true that Beatrice does not limit herself to an explanation, reproduction, and commentary of Weber's writings. As she says, she doesn't work on Weber, but with Weber. That is to say, she combines her Weberian references with other intellectual resources in a way that generates an original and persuasive explanation of our present condition. In other words, she makes Weber relevant for us today, and this is something we have discussed many times with Victor, but also with Lucía, Edith, Alvaro, and the other members of the network. We want to combine the thorough analysis of the Weberian texts with the application and juxtaposition of Weber's theories with our current social reality. Now, in this short comment, I am going to provide I want to refer to the two pillars of Beatrice's analysis on neoliberal bureaucracy, just in order to pinpoint some crucial elements, since we heard a lot of interesting and very dense points. In her book on neoliberal bureaucratization of the world, bureaucracy, or rather bureaucratization as an ongoing and always incomplete movement, is understood as a set of norms, rules, procedures, formalizations, and formulations that are formalistic in character as they emerge through a process of abstraction, a point to which I will return to later because of its pivotal role. In this context, a point Weber has already stressed becomes clear, namely that bureaucracy does not exclusively concern the administrative apparatus of the state, but every area of life that is regulated on the basis of impersonal codifications, general and abstract rules, and formalistic procedures. In other words, there is the bureaucracy of the market and of business. In fact, in Weber's analysis, the capitalist enterprise is presented along with the state, as the main pole of bureaucratization. But there is also the bureaucracy of the party, as well as the bureaucracy of scientific research, the bureaucracy of product certification, even the bureaucracy of leisure, of free time. In other words, using an expression of Claude Lefort, Béatrice Hibou stresses that bureaucracy is not something confined to the specific milieu of professional bureaucrats, for example, the employees of a public service or the accountants of a capitalist enterprise. On the contrary, bureaucracy is rooted in the whole of society and involves all social actors to the extent that their actions, their demands, their desires and aspirations are mediated or realized through the aforementioned formalistic and normalized processes. Now moving to the second pillar, let's say, of the analysis, neoliberalism, since we have this series of events with Sam Webster and now with Beatrice regarding neoliberalism. So for its part, the neoliberal element of our present is defined by Beatrice as the diffusion of norms, procedures, methods, ways of thinking, vocabularies, etc., that originate in the world of the market and the managerial business, but are disseminated in more and more social fields, extended and applied to more and more social activities. We might well think here of the examples of excellence or quality, in which quantitative methods of measurement and evaluation originating in the world of management are being extended to areas such as health, education, and scientific research. The example of benchmarking is even more telling here. Embedded in the very logic of this practice is the idea that the standards, norms, and good practices generated within a particular sector, for example, the car industry, can be standardized and applied to other sectors, thus promoting performance and efficiency. Finally, in order to add an example from everyday life, which has such a great importance in Beatrice's work, as we heard, we need only to think of the use of the expression win-win, which comes from the world of business and economics, of course, but lately is used all the more often to describe interpersonal relationships, friendships, and activities of our personal life. We say we find ourselves in a win-win situation, even if we refer to going out to have dinner with a friend, or I don't know what else. So within this framework, what for me is perhaps the most interesting element of Beatrice's work is the way she combines elements from what we could call social epistemology or epistemology of the social world with elements that could be classified as parts of a social diagnosis or even a social critique of the present. We already heard about the importance the ideal typical way of thinking has for Béatrice Hibou. In this context, the ideal type is understood as a methodological tool that is always partial, that is to say incomplete, since it can never grasp the totality of the infinite complexity of social reality. And this helps us to be able to conceive elements that are crucial for the formation of sociopolitical reality, but also to remember that these are exactly only elements which do not exhaust the whole picture. But what's interesting is that this epistemological idea of Weber's is not confined in the methodological, let's say, premises of Béatrice Hibou's conception of neoliberal bureaucratization. Because Beatrice also treats the norms, the rules, the procedures, the codifications, and so on that constitute the neoliberal bureaucracy as products of abstraction. Okay, and to be more precise, these norms, rules, procedures, and so on are the products of an abstraction procedure that is performed on the basis of the principles of measurability, profitability, economic growth, etc. This is exactly why we can talk of a neoliberal abstraction. So, Beatrice's argument goes, while there is nothing wrong with abstraction per se, since abstraction is a core procedure of human thought and social life, we must always keep in mind that abstraction is only a limited version of reality, a selection of certain parts of reality. It is not the reality as a whole. Reality is always much richer, much more diverse, heterogeneous, complicated, and dense than the formalizations we produce out of it. And this is why Beatrice is also so interested in the interplay between formalities and informalities, since this game between formalities and informalities, with all its tensions, allows us to have a much richer and more profound understanding of social reality. So I would like to sum up here and open the floor to the discussion by saying that what for me is so persuasive in Béatrice Hibou's work when it comes to Weber is that she does not handpick elements from here and there. I mean, from Weber's work. For example, she does not say, I'm a political scientist or a comparative sociologist, so I'm only going to occupy myself with the political writings of Weber or his writings on bureaucracy alone. Rather, she sees Weber's work as a whole, and in a way, she intertwines the sociological and epistemological aspects of it. In this respect, what she has told us today about finding a second, let's say, definition of the state by Weber in his objectivity essay is quite telling. So I'm going to stop here, but before that, I'm going to just ask one tiny question just to open the discussion with Beatrice. So, dear Beatrice, I would like to ask you, is it true in your opinion that there is this critical, let's say, intertwining of social epistemology and social diagnosis in your work? Does the epistemology of social world lead to a critique of neoliberal bureaucracy? And if so, how does this resonate with a non-normative approach as the one you want to provide us with? Is there here a conformity with Weber's call for Wertfreiheit? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yannis, for your remarkable comments. And maybe I think Beatrice would like to ask you, and then we can open for the others' questions. What do you think, Beatrice?
Yes, but I will be very brief because I think that the response was in your question, dear Yannis. I think that, of course, I think that being attached to this social epistemology, as you told, and as this social diagnosis, always with this preoccupation of seeking from empiry, from concrete situation. I think that it's necessary and it's obvious that we come to a critique of the society, because of the necessity to go beyond what in French we say les gros mots, big words like liberalism or neoliberalism that do not say anything if you don't go. So I think, working on this gros mots, neoliberalism, liberalism, protectionism, on what authoritarianism and so on, from an empirical perspective and the preoccupation of epistemology, it's necessarily goes to critics, and also because I think this is also very Weberian lesson. The function on the être of intellectuals is to think always differently, is to have a distant gaze. So I will respond like that. I don't know if you agree, but yes, necessary critique.
Okay, thanks, Professor Hibou. So now the floor is open to all of you. Feel free to raise your hand or write your comments or questions on the chat. I think there is a lot to talk about. I would ask you to present yourself before making your question. Okay, so we are okay. Some minister have a question? Yeah.
Yes, I thought that was a fantastic presentation. I didn't catch quite a lot in it, but it explains it explains something that I've not been able to work out about neoliberalism, which is why it's been so successful. Perry Anderson gave a lecture in London with the title of Neoliberalism, and it was very well attended. And part of it has appeared in New Left Review under the title Ideas in History. And for Perry Anderson, he's basically saying that neoliberalism has won. And he didn't actually explicitly say it, but socialism and the left have lost. And what I think Professor Hibou has brought to the conversation is that when Max Weber talks about ideas, or ideas in history, or ideas as an agency in history, Max Weber, au contraire, has the idea of ideal interests, which you get in a crucial passage, 2 or 3 crucial passages in Max Weber, so that you have material interests and ideal interests, and these forms, as Professor Hibou said, a constellation of interests. So you can have practical, material, and ideal interests. And this I think that this gets you to this notion of how we embody neoliberal practices in our own everyday life. That's how I understand what Beatrice is saying. And correct me if I'm wrong. And let me give an example, an empirical one. I mean, in Britain, in the United Kingdom, I mean, we were the sort of guinea pigs, the experimental field in which Mrs. Thatcher, Prime Minister Thatcher, rolled out neoliberalism. And I mean, there was a lot of political resistance, but if you take, I mean, in the city of London in the 1980s, this seemed to be material interests, and you could work with Habermas's concept of the colonization of the life world, Lebenswelt, yeah, but everyday social practices. This was accepted pretty quickly. There was a lot of political resistance, but for example, your banks changed, or your mortgage society, which was a Genossenschaft, it was privatized, and life went on as normal. So it was not so much the norms of neoliberalism, it's the normalization of it in everyday practices, which I think is what makes it so successful or universalizable. So yeah, no, I think this is a brilliant addition to thought using Weberian ideas.
So Beatrice, feel free to answer from Bimster, or do you want to collect more questions?
Yes, I think there is not really a question, but yes, I think that this idea of ideal interests on material interests and of constellation of interests is really very important, and it allows to understand why also what is sometimes presented as resistance must food neoliberal practices. Because, and you mentioned it in a different way, but because it takes the form and it plays with the norms of neoliberalism, and also because of it comes from interests that may have other foundation that neoliberal, but feed neoliberalism. So I think that display also in the variety of forms, of the variety of meanings, the plurality of processes that may be convergent, even if it's not thought as convergent, is a very important aspect. For example, I always think about our own profession in university. The neoliberal bureaucratization is everywhere, and we may we can try to go around. For example, I was talking with colleagues that were in the European Commission, and they told me, and I did not know this story, that all the process, very bureaucratic Europeanization process with all the norms that come from the European Union and now are diffused everywhere. At the beginning, it was a way of going around the injustice and the mandarina. I don't know in English how you say mandarina. Yannis.
The group of mandarins, let's say, I don't know,
yes.
right?
So,
this is, yeah.
So all these norms and all this bureaucracy was a way of circumventing all this. So it was not at all neoliberal, but it produced a big amount of a neoliberal bureaucracy. So I think taking into account the very large meaning of material interest and ideal interest is very important. I don't know if I respond well to your non-question.
Okay. So thank you, Professor Hibou. I have a question, so I will use my turn. I like you very much your presentation. I find very interesting thinking about bureaucratization today, yes, in the neoliberal era, as Yannis says, we are always thinking about Weber today, yes? So not to be a Weber priest. So thinking about if it is good to think with Weber, to think beyond Weber, to criticize also. So and the proliferation of bureaucratic practices that you said, it was so interesting. And I like you very much what you say about Weber as a thinker of the transformation. Yes, because we can. I think it is a so useful way of thinking about Weber. He was in a singular time looking all the transformation and analyzing it far beyond the origins of capitalism. So in this transformation that you are working on, so how to think bureaucracy today, I would like to ask if you want to say something about the relationship between bureaucracy and politics, because I was thinking on the one hand, Weber claims that bureaucracy is the most rational form in which domination can be done, as you say. That is, politics requires bureaucracy in Weber thought. As a leader to achieve its ends, he needs means, and bureaucracy is one of these means. But on the other hand, and I am thinking about the 1917, 1918 text, in which political text, and Weber there highlights a problem that is when bureaucracy do rules, do government. That is to say, what technical knowledge prevails and not values and political responsibility. So what do you think about this relationship now in the neoliberal era? I think your comment will be so fruitful to me. And the question is how this particular bureaucracy type leads with politics, thinking about values, responsibility, or what you say about private actors and policy makers, we can say. So yes, that's my question. Thank you.
I don't know if I can respond like that to this question. This is a very big question, but I think that neoliberal bureaucracy for me is really a form of domination. So it's political. It's politics. It's politics in a way, in a Foucauldian way of it's a governmentality. So it's politics in this sense. It's a governmentality. So I don't know if it's specific in the relation to politics. It's specific in the maybe in the forms, in the modalities, but I think that in the it's also what Weber or Rizzi were analyzing in bureaucracy. They were talking of domination of politics also. So what is new, I think, is what is new is in saying this, I am not very original. One is individualism. So responsibility is transferred to the individuals it's no more on the collective level. So it's a way of de-responsibilization of the politics as a community. It's another originality is what is the realm of neoliberal bureaucratization is the domination of certain actors. So in their definition of no, I will not say it like that, but it's the conceptualization. So in terms of that is abstracted from management, market, big enterprises to the whole society. And this process of abstraction is not only in norms or procedures, it's also in politics, in the sense that politics is seen as solve problems. So, and not to find solution, to work on problems, and not certain values, certain visions. This is, I think, it's shaping politics in a very important way. So I think I am not very original saying this, and I have to think more, but for me, neoliberal bureaucracy, it's one form of politics. Because in my view, politics, it's not only from the political actors. We are all a part of we are all political actors. So in this way, neoliberal bureaucratization is politics. I don't know if I have to think more, but because often people are saying that this process of bureaucratization is a process of depolitization. And I think it's not at all depolitization. It's a form of politicization, and it's a form of politics. And the techniques, the procedures, the norms, they are politics. So this is very rapid, and but I will respond. I don't know if it but I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, yes. You are so clear. Thank you. Yes, Sam Lister. Yeah. Want to talk?
Well, I would make.
And Alvaro next. Okay, and Alvaro next.
I'd make one quick point then. Does the United States actually escape this description, analysis? And I say that, I've been in touch with Alvaro about a call for papers which centers on the extraordinary role of Elon Musk in sabotaging, destroying, well, we don't know, but disrupting, I think, is the neutral word, the federal bureaucracy. Now, it seems to me that federal bureaucracy is very much an old-fashioned bureaucracy which it's not neoliberal, it's a real bureaucracy, and it works, and it hasn't been neoliberalized to nearly the same extent to which European bureaucracies have. So, American exceptionalism is there to see. And so until Elon Musk and President Trump came along, it was fairly indestructible. So that's just a thought. And is Elon Musk being so destructive simply because the American federal democracy wasn't really neoliberal? It hadn't made the move. So that's a question. Is the American situation atypical to this universalization?
Alvaro, I have a question. What do you think, Professor Hibou, if we hear Alvaro and then you answer? Or yes, okay. And then Hannah Scoopy, I think, want to ask a question. Okay, Alvaro, the floor is yours.
I wanted to jump in because my question or comment is related to Sam's. When Béatrice Hibou was exposing his, let's say, love affair with Weber back in the 1980s, she mentioned the problem of the redeployment of the state and the rise of new intermediaries. And I immediately thought of Elon Musk because of the following reason. I assume that the bureaucracies Elon Musk and his allies are destroying are perhaps to a certain extent irrelevant, but other things they are doing are essential. So my guess, but this is not very scholarship, it's just commenting on world affairs. My guess would be that they are going to hire private companies to do the services which the federal bureaucracy had been doing for decades. And so in that way creates opportunities to earn money for the American private sector. So like with his spaceship company, this is probably turned to be another case of state capitalism. And another question, but yes, as a provocation, we all know that Weber wrote that bureaucracies cannot be destroyed. So I'm wondering what is going to happen here. One possibility is that those bureaucracies, possibly the judiciary, are going to destroy Elon Musk at some point, because I cannot believe that they are not encroaching upon rules that could take them into Yale. They are not going to go to Yale, just like Trump hasn't gone to Yale, but they can get into troubles, and this might be the way to stop them. Well, but I won't continue discussing current affairs and leave it here. Thank you to Beatrice and Yannis.
No, I think that I can respond both questions that really go together, because I use universal bureaucracy of Weber precisely to say that bureaucracy is not state bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is the process of rationalization with norms and so on. Neoliberal bureaucracy is a very specific bureaucracy that is abstracted from the market and the management enterprises. So in this way, I don't think that the states are an exception. And I don't think that Musk is going to destroy the bureaucracy. Maybe he will participate to transform what Winster called old bureaucracy, the bureaucracy of the state non-neoliberal bureaucracy, state bureaucracy, with neoliberal bureaucracy through enterprises, private enterprises. But it's not destroying bureaucracy, it's transforming the type of bureaucracy. So I think Weber is right when he said bureaucracy cannot be destroyed because the Weber also told us, wrote, capitalism and bureaucracy has met, and they have never, and they disjoint never. I don't know in French, la bureaucratie. Capitalisme et bureaucratie se sont rencontrés et ne se sont plus jamais séparés. Yes, capitalism and bureaucracy met, and they never have been separate since then. So I think that in this sense, bureaucracy cannot be destroyed since capitalism needs all this process of rationalization, calculability, previsibility, etc. So we are witnessing a transformation of the bureaucracy, but I think, yes, it's transforming. It's more neoliberal in the sense of it goes more through private actors or private norms. It's not only actors, it's norms, procedures, etc. But yes, in this sense, I don't think that the US is an exceptionalism, and maybe I think it's maybe it's even a very not an example, but yes, a model. I don't know if I respond to your question, but I see this like that.
I think, thank you, Professor Hibou. I think Hannah Scopy has a question. Okay. Hello, Anna, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hello, first of all. And thank you also, Professor Hibou, for your discussion. I'm a little bit in fear to say something irrelevant in case that I haven't caught something. But what I thought, just for myself and my thinking with or over Weber, is a tension, and I'm really interested in if you have met this tension in your work as well. And it's somehow regarding with what Ms. Pinto has said beforehand. And yeah, like first of all, I thought the combination from Weber and Foucault was really interesting, because both in a different way are very important names in the game of self-relation of the individual. And in what context society responds to that. And well, so I think my main point regards the invisibility of norms. Because what we have is, for me, like a tension, and maybe that's very like a normal thing for Weber. But on the one hand, we have this approach of being value-free, and the notion of you always have to know the last reason of your science, and he's like very cautious with how value interferes in science and the other way around. And I think he's very strong in his scientific work in making clear that there's only like a value rationality. So being rational is always like connected to a reason, to a value, to a last value. And yeah, we have this, for example, in his explanation of the how is it in English? Polytheismus, like die Rückkehr der Götter. And on the other hand, Weber is one of the most, or the biggest name in self-rationalization processes. And I always find it very hard to combine those things. Because on the one hand, we have those scientific works who present like a very thoughtful way in how values interfere in life. And then with what you said, the neoliberal bureaucracy somehow is the very other pole, because bureaucracy doesn't mean we have the absence of values. It's just the abstraction of some values to such a degree that we don't see them as values anymore. And we have this hegemony of rationalization without detecting that this is like a very deep norm-based structure we build it, because efficiency is a norm in itself. And so yeah, I don't know if I could like really pinpoint the tension, but I felt like it somehow popped up in your work as well, because how do we deal with this kind of entangled situation that we have like a vermeintlich value-free zone of politics, but it's the very opposite.
This is not at all, this is a very interesting question. So you touch something very important. And I agree that tension is very important, but I agree also that the term you use, invisibility, it's a very important concept. And I think that there is a process of, I will add at invisibility, I will add naturalization and meaning to put together what you told us. In the process of neoliberal bureaucratization, I think one of the way of the diffusion of neoliberal bureaucracy is precisely the invisibility. We don't feel, for example, a norm of formality as a constraint. For example, when you are looking for justice or for transparency, it's a desire, and it's with a real value. But at the same time, it goes on this justice or this transparency is only concretized through norms, procedures that are the constraints, and even that can be violent. So there is an invisibility of the norms, of the procedures, that make this neoliberal bureaucratization possible, and the process that naturalize the norms. For example, we cannot imagine nowadays that the 100% security is not the norm. It's normal. But this is, it goes with this, a lot of constraints, norms, procedure, and so on. So I think that there is tension, there is contradiction, there must be violence, but most of the time it's invisible through the process of depolitization, technicization, naturalization, and also the play on meanings, because nobody is against security, or nobody is against quality, nobody is against competence, or I don't know. But the meaning change, and also in the absence of the discussion on the critical gaze on these concepts, it is invisible. So I don't know if I respond exactly to your question, but in my analysis, the tensions, the fights is at the heart, because it's at the heart of the politics. And neoliberal bureaucracy, it's politics. So I agree totally. And I think that this question of invisibility, naturalization, the invisibilization of the plurality of meanings, signification is very important. And also the fact that at the what do society is the conflict, is the tension, and then often we are, when we are working on an ideology, for example, neoliberalism, we forget this. And on here, to cross with other authors, I think that Gramsci is important, because both they put conflicts at the heart of society. And for example, when Gramsci talk about hegemony is a conflictual process. And it's it's really in convergence with Weber, when for Weber, domination is also tension, fight, and so on. In my
Okay, thanks, Professor Hibou. Anna, for your interesting question. You have a message from Eric Hanke in the chat. I can read it. Thank you, Anna, for this philosophical question. I think it's Weber's Kultur Protestantische view of modernity. And Edith also said we should come to an end. So I think this is true. Unfortunately, I think it was a fantastic presentation of Professor Hibou. We are all glad to you and for your time, for your dedication, for talking with us, and Yannis Ktenas for the remarkable comments. And he opens the dialogue. I think it was a fruitful dialogue. Thanks, Binster, Álvaro Morcillo, and Hannah for your question. I think we could talk for long, but there was some topics I think that are so relevant around bureaucracy, neoliberal bureaucracy. And this is, I think, the question of if its bureaucracy is a humanity fate in the Schicksal way, or we can avoid bureaucracy if we are such ways of doing that, how politics and values and economy play in that. So, and I was thinking about the comment of Anna about the conception, the Weberian conception of law. Yes, because law is the outcome of a struggle, of a values struggle. So norms are not neutral. And I think what Beatrice Hibou say about Foucault, Gramsci is so interesting to think in this way also. So if anyone, okay, Yannis get his, okay,
clapping.
we can clapping. We can close. If anyone wants to say something.
No, I want only to thank you very much. It was very interesting. So I hope to continue to discuss with you.
Okay. Keep in touch, and you can follow on our social media to know about the next event of Beber Scholars Network. I want to also thank Álvaro Morcillo, Edith Hanke, Victor Strasseri, and Brenda Weingart for the coordination of this network and the event. So have a good evening. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Beatrice. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup et au revoir.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Tschüss.